Right. Well, I don't really know how to start. I'm just going to say hi and then ask you to introduce yourself. It's very awkward. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Mary. Lovely to see you.
You too. Thank you very much for taking the time to have a chat. It's been a little while since I've seen you, a few months since I finished at college. I just wondered if you could start off by just telling everyone who you are, apart from being my floristry tutor.
So my name's Jane Benefield. I'm a floristry course manager here at Morton College, which is in Warwickshire. My floristry journey started a long time ago, far too long to mention. After I'd failed my A-levels and travelled the world for 7 years doing catering, I decided, right, I really want to get into something that's craft-based, but I love nature. And I was working in a bar as a bar manager, and I was creating some items for Christmas. So we were doing some Christmas Christmas displays for the tables. And I went into a flower shop and I just went, oh, this is me. Wires, tapes, all the craft bits. There wasn't glue at that time. And I just thought, this is what I want to do. So I took a great pay cut and went and found a job 5 days a week. And I went to college on the 6th day. And I had a very traditional education. And I worked in a very traditional Interfora shop. But that gave me a really great background. Whilst I was there, I started competing and found my true love. So I love competing. So I started off on the Interfora competitions and the heats. I made it once to the final and I was only level 2 and I was right up to my neck in it. It was terrible, complete disaster, but I learned loads from that. And then went on a few years later to win the Interfora Florist of the Year. That gave me loads of opportunities. It was wonderful. And I was working for Tracy Tomlinson and she also supported me really well. So we went on buying trips to Holland, demonstrations, all sorts of avenues were open. All the while I was still working in a relatively traditional, very busy shop, doing lots of funerals, lots of weddings. And then I had children and someone asked me if I wanted to cover some teaching at a local college in Coventry. And I thought, I don't know about this. I'd be teaching people to make the same thing year after year after year. But I gave it a go and then found my second love, which is definitely teaching. And I absolutely love seeing the new intake of students who don't know anything at all, but they know they love flowers. And I love seeing that progression and they go on and on and on through the industry and like yourself end up running a business and being qualified and just falling in love with our industry. So I'm a floristry course manager. I'm also a floristry judge, so I belong to the UK Judges Guild, and I'm also a consultant for City and Guilds. So I do consultancy work for City and Guilds and moderate. I'm a moderator for City and Guilds, and alongside that, I also do some floristry. So I do private floristry assignments when people order them. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's so funny because you're a very modest person and like a lot of that stuff I knew, but not all of it I knew. And I think that even though I've known you for 3 or 4 years now, there's lots of sort of depth in your floristry career that you that keeps coming out. And I remember when I first started with you at Morton, I didn't have a clue about anything to do with the floristry industry really, and I didn't I didn't really know that there was such a big side to floristry in terms of competitions. It hadn't occurred to me that that was something that people competed in before. But I was in a flower shop in Leamington, Sarah Horn's flower shop, and I was buying some flowers for Monday's course for whatever we were going to make that week. And I was chatting to Sarah Vaughan, and she was saying that she knew you, and I was telling her about that I'd started at college. And she told me about how, I don't know which competition it was, but she was competing and you were competing, and there were different sort of competitions throughout the main competition, and that you basically won everything and ended up having to take all of your trophies and awards away from this competition in a wheelbarrow. So that, and I was like, didn't have a clue that you were so awarded, and because you've won a Chelsea Gold medal.
I won a Chelsea Gold alongside Tracy, so we worked together as a team, and it was in the old days when Chelsea used to set up a display, so we did 3 pieces each. It was Cinderella, so we chose Cinderella, and we just had a ball. It was really good, but really hard work to produce. If you think in previous years, people at Chelsea have produced 1 piece. We had 6 pieces to produce, so that was really good. So I've won a gold and I've won a bronze at Chelsea. I love competing. I love making something. I don't want to win. I want to make something beautiful. But also on the competition side, I've been really super lucky to have Laura Leong as my one of my greatest floristry friends, and I've been her assistant in the Europa Cup and in Italy, and I've travelled lots with her, and I was on the team at Essen with Floral Fundamentals, which is Alison Bradley runs in, and that's to do with the growers in Holland. So I've been super lucky to travel lots. I also went to Russia with World Skills. I love that side of it. But I also love teaching someone how to make a buttonhole and seeing their face when they suddenly can wire a very traditional wired carnation buttonhole. Yeah. So it's almost from one extreme to the other. So I think competitions like the catwalk, sometimes it's unrealistic. Well, a lot of the time it's unrealistic that you would ever commercially sell that piece, but it's about an expression of art.
Yeah. And you've had lots of success like through your students as well, because lots of your students have done competitions, because I took part in the World Skills competition when I was at college, and competition didn't grab me like I think it did you, obviously, and like it does other people. It wasn't quite for me, but I did. I did all right in my, I won the heats of my first one and went through, and then but I think what I found from competition was that it really teaches you discipline to make things very accurate and very technically correct, which I think is really good, even if then you go off and break all the rules, knowing how to stick to the rules and knowing that discipline that competition teaches you is really valuable, I think. And you've had some of your students have gone through and done really well and got Chelsea medals and got through to the finals of World Skills and all those kind of things. So that must feel really good as well.
It does. I love seeing. New generations coming along, and seeing people progress on to the World Skills squad. Like currently, we've got Hannah in the squad being trained. Is really. It makes me super proud that I've managed to instill some sort of passion and that desire for competition and the discipline of competition. But that's not to say that if you were to come to Morton Moral, you have to do competition. All the level 3s do as a part of their course. But it's not something that's compulsory to do. It's a student's choice, and we have students that go in many variety of ways. So from the traditional Interfora or relay shop working, to being freelance, and to traveling around the world, to becoming a lecturer, to, you know, also there's all sorts of different routes. So you don't, you know, it's certainly not compulsory to do a competition to come here, but, you know, that's kind of my specialist field.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason that probably so many of your students do have a go at competition at least is just because they get that kind of enthusiasm from you, and it's just, you know, you can't help but want to give it a go at least, which is what I did, and ended up. But I just have visions of my wired bridal bouquet in the World Skills competition, and just like hoping that somehow no one was going to see it, but they obviously did because they were judging it.
It's not just about that wired bridal bouquet, it's the whole bigger picture, all the friends that you made doing it, and the you know, the ethos behind it. I just think it opens so many different doors, doesn't it? Like coming to college.
Yeah.
So I think it's, whilst it's great to be bench trained in a really good shop, and I know lots of florists that are bench trained to a very high standard, coming to college and or competing opens other doors where you're mixing with a variety of people, and you can go off and do anything. Once you think, I can go off to the NEC and I can compete in the final of World Skills in Floristry, maybe you can go and do anything now. You didn't need to do that to know that, but sometimes people do need to do that to know that. So, you know, it's, you know, a great thing. And I look at Zoe Rawlinson, who came to college at the age of 16, a school leaver. And she went all the way through all the levels, 2, 3, 4 and 5. She was also on the squad. And now she works here as a technical instructor and manages Fabulous Flowers in Oxfordshire. So, you know, her journey, and to be there at the beginning of her journey, and now, you know, to see her blossom into such a, you know, she's got a wonderful career. So, you know, competition has given her that, really, those skills, as well as being in the right place at the right time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, as you say, being having that sort of bench training, I definitely have taken a huge amount from my college training, my actual my qualifications. The bit of competition that I did do, as I said, taught me a lot, even though it wasn't kind of my thing. But also working in a high street florist shop and doing that day in, day out, doing everything, and kind of doing everything a million times. You know, you make the same, not exactly the same, but you're doing the same kind of pieces week in and week out. That kind of repetition and practice has really stood me in good stead. And I have found that through people I've worked with in those kind of environments, people definitely, you know, they don't need to be qualified to do those kind of things. That some of the best florists that I worked with just were, as you say, bench trained. But there is like another kind of world that you get from floristry qualification. And I wondered if you could just explain some of the things, because before I did a floristry qualification, didn't have a clue about the breadth of stuff that I would learn if I did one. You kind of think mainly about all the practical things that you will learn to make, but can you just explain all the other things that you do learn with a sort of more formal qualification that you give?
Yeah. Well, to start with, we offer lots of leisure courses here as well. So a lot of our some of our students come from the leisure courses. So they have an introduction into floristry. But our main course is our level 2 course. And our level 2 course is fundamental. So it's teaching you, it doesn't matter if you want to create the biggest broken arch installation, the most fabulous hanging design, suspended hanging design. You need to look after the product. You need to know the name of the product. You need to know the mechanics behind it. You need to know the elements and principles of design in order to design it and create it. You need to know the health and safety aspects behind it. So all of that stuff, you need to know the fundamental basics of floristry, and that's what's taught at level 2. So for me, I think level 2 is absolutely vital, and then to progress on to the level 3 like you do, to learn a little bit more, look at things in a little bit more of a fluid, more creative fashion. We do try and say, as you know, we do try and stay very current here. So I know quite often people think of college as being old-fashioned and old-fashioned arrangements. We do obviously have to learn traditional methods, and traditional methods come back round into fashion eventually. So you learn traditional methods, but we also always try and look at sustainable approaches. We also try and look at what is a current trend. So, for example, we will do a traditional front-facing triangular arrangement in floral foam. We would promote that the student would use biofoam, but the choice ultimately is up to the student, and it's up to the retail shop where they go and practice in. We have to teach everybody the whole range of items. But also on level 2, we will do a non-traditional medium. So we use a chicken wire, and we use an urn, and we do an asymmetric, what I call it an asymmetric constant spry. So it fulfills the criteria that's taught. It's also showing people that the fashions and the trends that are in industry, as well as learning the basics. So we do always try and build in some fun stuff, you know, on top of the traditional. So some non-traditional as well as traditional.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of traditional versus non-traditional, you've already sort of touched on this, but we, as you say, while I was at college, we did an entire project actually about trends during the level 3, I think that was, and so we were sort of looking at what the current trends are and what the sort of, you know, upcoming trends might be. And the thing that's so interesting, particularly for someone who at the time had, you know, only just got into floristry, so you're kind of pretty much seeing everything as if this is all new, was that a lot of the trends, particularly some of the biggest trends at the moment, are all completely unnew to you at all. You're just like, yeah, we've been there, done that.
You make me sound like a dinosaur.
I don't think that's the case. It's probably just that the trends come around so quickly and they just sort of people forget about them. But so obviously, as you know, my big thing is dried flowers, and that is something which is you know, trending at the moment and is having a good time in the limelight. But that's not something that's new to you. And the other thing is as you again have touched on, the sustainability. So there's you know, lots of pressure, as there is in all industries, for the industry to kind of check itself for its sustainability. And one of the big issues, I suppose, about floristry is the use of floral foam. So the use of single-use plastics, and floral foam is one of those. And again, all of the kind of trendy techniques that people are talking about how to be so sustainable now, they're all things that you, when you were cutting your teeth and training, that was just how you learned, because floral foam hasn't been around forever, and it hasn't been as cheap as it is now forever. So things like using chicken wire and moss and wiring and taping instead of using foam are not new to you. And I just wondered what your perspective is about seeing things coming round again, and maybe how they're different now.
I mean, yeah, both of those things. So when I first started in floristry, dried flowers were really huge. They were massive, and you'd spend hours and hours making dried flower arrangements and putting them out on the shelves in funny old pots. And then you know, it really was an everyday occurrence to make dried arrangements, and also we'd mix it in a little bit with the fresh flowers as well. So you would use dried statice in with a few fresh flowers. So it's something we did, something I was quite used to. And then it became fairly early on in my career, it became very, very old fashioned, and it was awful. You know, you couldn't bear it. You know, if someone wanted a dried arrangement, you're like, oh no, it's awful. No, we're supposed to dried away. And, you know, I've gone through periods here even. So I've been at college now 11 years. And when I first started here, we chucked all the dried away because we didn't, you know, that wasn't trendy, or wasn't, the students didn't want to learn the dried side of it.
When was that? When were dried flowers? When was the previous time that they were around? And did they go out?
90s. So the 90s, they were probably at the height of their fashion, and people were drying them and, you know, and using them in the shops. And then kind of vintage came along. So the vintagey stuff and the teacups and everything came along. And then a few years later, dried suddenly made an appearance. And we've always had, as part of the curriculum, a dried or artificial arrangement. And me being me, I'm very driven by nature and botany. I've always done it with dried seed heads and taught vegetative design using dried seed heads, rather than going out and buying dried materials, and trying to make it a little bit more interesting for the students who didn't want to know anything about dried. And then all of a sudden people were like, oh, well, I quite like dried, and pampas grass came along. And so, you know, we're making things like this, for example. I mean, a few years ago, maybe even as little as 3 years ago, people would have been horrified to make something like this, especially if it's in peach. And I remember being accused by students once because I was using peach. Oh, that's such an old-fashioned colour. So yeah, moss-wise, I was taught. So I started my training at a florist shop in Coventry, not Tracy's shop, and the owner there didn't buy Oasis because it was so floral foam, because it was so expensive. So in that day, we had in that era, we were very much juniors and senior florists and managers. And I was the junior florist, and we spent hours and hours and hours mossing all of our funeral work and wiring up all of the greenery. And, you know, it was a very good grounding. And now that's come back into fashion, and I know how to do it. So because I've learned that skill and that technique, this is why we must never stop learning all of the techniques that we possibly can. And, you know, the vogue for buttonholes that aren't wired and taped and wired. You can make a very nice buttonhole that's not wired and taped with the correct materials, and with dried, like you do beautiful dried ones, or with materials that don't require a lot of water. Perfect. But wiring and taping seals in, add the moisture, so the buttonholes last longer. So you need to know both.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, if you don't know how to do both, then you can't choose which one you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, it's not, you might have a client, if you're a wedding florist, who wants a particular kind of flower. So you have to give them what they want, and you have to know how to work with that flower.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of, I mean, we used to joke about it being our spelling test, but we also, as part of my qualification, learnt the Latin names of lots of the flowers and foliage and plants, and lots of plant care, which is useful if you work in a florist shop, but also just in your daily life. I find I kill far fewer flowers and plants now in my own home. But all of those things are just kind of make you quite a well-rounded florist, I think, even if then you, like I have, kind of, you know, championed into my own little niche. But I always have that kind of background and all the sort of bedrock of all of that knowledge as well.
And I think it's about a professionalism, Mary, so that it enables you to go and do anything. So if someone comes up to you and says, right, Mary, I want you to work as a freelance florist, and I've got a job on in Dubai. And you get to Dubai and you have spent the whole of your career going, oh no, I don't want to know the Latin names, the botanical names for anything. The person who's employed you to do it asks you to do a buying list, and you look at the flower availability, and because you don't know your botanical names, you get something muddled up. So I think the broader your knowledge is, and the more your knowledge is, the more scope it gives you to take your path in any different direction. And the students at Mortimer certainly go in all different directions. And that's a real pleasure for me to see. I love seeing the direction that people go in.
Yeah. You said just before we started recording, that you had a huge intake this year for the level 2, and I asked you why that was, and you said that you thought that there was a bit of a sort of surge in floristry in general because of social media and just perhaps the kind of the pandemic and the lockdowns as well, making people start to think a bit more about using their creativity maybe and doing kind of like more craft things. So do you think that that's that you know, floristry in itself is growing in trend a little bit at the moment?
I certainly do. So, you know, I think that it really is becoming a trendy career, and the kind of the demographics of the students that are enrolling are more and more so the type of people that want to choose it as a career. Whereas in the past, it was either school leavers or it was more people that were just wanted to do it just as something to do before they retired. Whereas now it really is like, yeah, this is really trendy. And, you know, and I think that's social media. I really do think it's social media driven. I also think it's kind of about the lockdown and about the pandemic has made people appreciate nature. And there's also been a huge intake of horticulture students at Pershaw College. And I really do think it's about looking after things and seeing things grow from the beginning and then taking them to their end. To their end design, and you know, so now we're seeing a lot of flower farmers, we're seeing a lot of locally grown flowers, which is wonderful. So yeah, I think there is a big upsurge in interest in flowers, and you know, that's probably come from, you know, way back before the pandemic, and I think I think a lot of it has come from the catwalk. So there were a few big catwalk shows maybe 8 years ago, and I think now it's filtering down, and a lot of the fashion houses were using florists and flowers, and now that has come closer and closer and closer, and now it's reaching our industry as professional florists.
And do you think, because when the group that I was with when I was at college, we were mostly, I think all but one were people who were sort of having a bit of a career change, actually. And I think for some of us, at least, we had sort of experiences with our careers before floristry that had, I don't know, different people had different experiences, but where we'd either been a bit burnt out by something, or just the kind of things had got to a stage where we realized that, you know, we weren't doing what we were really kind of made for, or something like that. And that I can kind of see, without sounding too dramatic, that it was quite a sort of healing thing, really. I think it was for me. And I think part of that is the fact that you're working with something natural, and you know, the materials that you're working with are natural, and they are something that you have to look after properly, which I think in itself is a bit of a healing thing if you're looking after something else. Having something creative as well, it depends on the kind of person you are, but for me that was quite a healing thing.
You
So
don't think about anything else when you're being creative.
That's true. And I think as well that there's something about floristry which is very gratifying. Like it's, you know, if you're working in a different industry where you're not actually kind of making a product at the end of what you're making, you can sometimes struggle to see like the value that you're adding, I think, whereas with floristry and lots of other creative industries, you're kind of working towards something and then you make it and then you can see it and it's finished, and there's something really gratifying about having that kind of completed circle. And I wonder if that's part of the reason that people are a bit attracted to floristry at the moment as well. There's just feels like a slightly different feeling in what people want from their lives. Like people have had a bit of a different perspective because of the pandemic, and they realize that maybe they want to do something that gives them that kind of gratification and is a bit sort of healing and connects them with nature a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely a wellness factor with doing floristry. And like I said, when you're creative, sometimes, you know, we have classes in here that some just suddenly go silent because everyone, there's nothing wrong. Everybody is just focused on doing that one task and you cannot think about anything else. You're just doing that task and repetitively doing that task. So everything is left outside the classroom. We always say that here. So leave everything outside. And also that you make friends at Floristry College, at Flower School, that you make for life, and you know people on the similar walk of life as you, all from different, you know, all from different backgrounds, different paths that they've come down.
Yeah.
So that aspect of it, but I don't want to put rose tinted glasses on it.
No.
Quite often I'm feeling sometimes you look at the most beautiful pictures on social media and it's gorgeous, and you know, you're in your garden picking some lovely flowers, making a beautiful arrangement. What's not going on is you're not seeing the background. So you're not seeing the scrubbing the buckets, you're not seeing the heavy lifting, you're not seeing the long hours, you're not seeing the not eating for hours and hours on end, the no sleep. And I very much would tell every student that starts here, the cold, I don't beat around the bush. So every student that starts, I say, right, this is the reality. So the end product is beautiful, the product that we work with is beautiful, the people on the whole are wonderful community florists, and the college environment as well, really supportive. But actually it can be hard physical graft that's cold, and you know, you might poison yourself. There's all sorts of factors that people don't even consider, but you have to have a love for it and you have to have an absolute passion. And I've always said, the minute you lift up the box of the first Narcissus from the Isles of Scilly, and you lift up and you go, oh, paper whites. If you don't do that, then you need to go into a different career. You know, you need to be excited by your product. And you know, I just, every time I see a flower, I'm just like, oh, you know, all these years later, you know, you see the first little tiny bunches of violet, if you can get hold of them, or some lily of the valley that I saw the other day that someone had bought out of season, and you just go, oh, that's beautiful. So it's that need to want to work with that product.
Yeah, I think it helps you. Yeah, well, the reality is definitely, again, I went into it very naively. It was a bit of a impulsive decision, to be quite honest, me going into floristry, but it was so funny, the kind of things that hadn't occurred to me about floristry. The biggest one being the cold in a flower shop, just freezing. And I always have cold hands and feet anyway, so I was a lot of the time working in a flower shop, absolutely freezing. But I think I definitely did find and do find pleasure, a certain kind of pleasure, in that side of the industry as well. Like that kind of, yes, it's tiring and you're lugging buckets of heavy, you know, all the buckets are full of water, so everything's heavy. So,
Right.
and bleaching out Dutch buckets and all those kind of things. But what I loved, which I never had when I was working in an office, is that feeling when you finish and you get home and you're cold and you have a hot shower and then you're tired in a good way. You're not kind of tired in that way that when you're in a stuffy office, you kind of feel like headachy tired. You're tired in a really good way that makes you sleep well. So I think if you're the kind of person that can enjoy that side of things as well, then it definitely helps. I think I actually quite enjoy the adverse side of floristry as well.
Yeah, and it brings about a real camaraderie, doesn't it, between everybody in the team? You know, a peak period, and you know, you've got hundreds of orders, so you crack on, you get the speed going. You're doing that, you're doing the other. Everyone's freezing, but we know we're going to have pizza at the end of it. Then you know, it's a real great feeling to achieve all of those hundreds and hundreds of orders. And a little top tip for you from the lovely Fiona Perry. She's got a heated jacket that you press a button and you plug it in and charge it up, and it's like a heated car seat. You press a button and it heats up and keeps you warm. I'm getting one.
Yeah. They need to be the same kind of thing for your feet, I think. I took your tip of sheepskin insoles, and that helped a bit, but they need some kind of heated blanket for inside your boot as well.
Or a cardboard box. That's what we used to do back in the day, stand on a cardboard box. But
yeah, you can just get off the tiled floor.
Yeah, we had a river flowing underneath the shop in the middle of Coventry. So it was a concrete floor and a river. It was really cold.
Cold and damp. Yeah.
Oh, but I mean, wonderful. It's a fantastic career, and I'm really lucky to have the sort of students that come to Morton Moral and just enjoy being in the environment, enjoy each other, and enjoy the learning, you know, and progress on up the levels. You can get up to master's level in floristry. It just takes you on many different journeys.
Yeah, including to Holland. We had a fabulous trip to Holland and we saw the flower farms. That was brilliant.
We're doing that again this year, but we're going to Floriade. So it's the biggest horticultural fair. It's only held every 10 years. So looking forward to that. That'd be good. Fingers crossed. All being well. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jane. It's been so nice to catch up, and it's made me like sort of remember all the great things about having done my qualification, and I'm so grateful for having done it. You know, there's, like with everything, every qualification I've ever done, there's lots of things that I probably won't use again, or, you know, pieces that I've made that I wouldn't make again and probably won't have the opportunity to make again, but nothing is wasted about it. Everything just gives you a different way to think about things, a different way to learn techniques that you can kind of adapt to other things. And yeah, so I'm very grateful, and yeah, I kind of wish I could do, particularly level 2 was such a huge, like, I learned so much in such a short amount of time. That was such a kind of thrill. And like you say, meeting those people and going to Holland and having a fantastic time and cementing those friendships that still, like, you kind of feel like they're never gonna not be my friends, those people. So
well, it's lovely to see you, Mary, and catch up, and, you know, all the best of luck with your wonderful business. And we'll definitely watch your progress. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to teach you.
Thanks so much, Jane.